The fluorescent lights in Atlanta Mercy Hospital always buzzed like they were trying to say something no one wanted to hear. But Elijah Carter didn't hear anything except the weak, uneven breaths coming from his 9-year-old daughter. Zuri, she lay hooked to machines far more expensive than anything he'd ever touched in his entire life. Doctors said she needed a rare procedure. Doctors also said his insurance wasn't sufficient. He said both sentences with the same tired sympathy like. Black fathers had heard this story too many times. Elijah didn't break. Black dads learn early. You fall apart later, never in front of your baby. He held Zuri's cold hand and whispered, "Daddy's right here, baby girl. Just stay with me." The hospital door slid open softly. He expected a nurse coming to check vitals. Instead, a woman walked in wearing a tailored winter white coat that didn't belong in public hospitals. Her presence shifted the whole room quiet power, unapproachable. The kind of rich that made even doctors straighten up. She didn't introduce herself. She went straight to Zuri's chart, reading it with the accuracy of someone who owned the building. Elijah shot up. "Excuse me, ma'am, who are you?" "Why are you touching her chart?" The woman finally looked at him. Her eyes were cold, steel gray, but not cruel just. Unsoftened by normal human life. "My name is Avery Sterling," she said. Elijah's stomach dropped. Avery Sterling, founder of Sterling Biotech, the billionaire who built half the city's medical empire, the woman whose photo hung in the very lobby downstairs. She wasn't supposed to be here, not in the pediatric ward, not over his daughter. Avery closed the chart gently. "She doesn't have long. Her oxygen saturation is collapsing again." Elijah's voice cracked. "I know that. What I don't know is why a billionaire CEO is standing in my child's room." Avery stepped closer, not threatening, just deliberate. "I'm here because I can save her," she said quietly, like she was stating a fact, not offering a miracle. Elijah's pulse spiked. "What do you mean?" "Save her. The procedure she needs is experimental. My company developed it. I have the authority to approve it instantly." She paused, and the resources to cover every cost. His knees almost buckled. He gripped the edge of the bed. "But why?" He whispered. "Why Zuri? Why us?" Avery studied him with unsettling intensity, like she was evaluating not a man, but a decision she'd already made. "This isn't charity, Mr. Carter. I don't believe in charity." She stepped closer until her voice barely rose above the machine's rhythmic beeping. "I want something in return." Elijah froze. His palms went cold. "What? What could you possibly want from me?" Avery's eyes flicked to Zurismal. Fragile, innocent, and something dark, possessive, and heartbreakingly personal crossed her face. "When she's grown," Avery said softly, "I want her to carry my air." The room didn't move. Even the machines seemed to pause. Elijah's heart slammed against his ribs. Horror and desperation twisting together, and in the silence that swallowed him, one thought, terrible, unholy, fatherly, forced itself into his mind. If this is the only way to keep Zuri alive tonight, what kind of man would he be if he refused? Before that night at Atlanta Mercy? Before a billionaire ever spoke his name? Elijah Carter's life was already hanging together by threads no one else could see. Most mornings started before the sun thought about coming up. His cheap alarm clock didn't always ring, but the noise in his head didn't do. Light bill late, school calling, overtime cut, Zuri's cough, always Zuri's cough. That dry, scraping sound from the next room could drag him out of the deepest sleep faster than any siren. Their apartment sat on the edge of southwest Atlanta. Where the paint peeled, the stairwells smelled like old smoke and pine sol. And you could hear somebody arguing 3 floors down through thin walls. It wasn't the worst building he'd seen, but it wasn't the place he'd once promised his daughter either. "Daddy, you up?" Her voice came through the cracked bedroom door one morning like it always did, small but trying to be strong. "Yeah, baby girl." "I'm up," he called back, rubbing his face. His hands were rough, scarred from years of work that had never paid what it should have. He swung his legs off the mattress, feeling the springs protest under his weight. The mattress had come from a neighbor who moved out overnight. still plastic on one corner, ripped on the other. Most of their furniture was like that, borrowed stories from other people's lives. The kitchen was barely big enough for two people to stand in at once. The fridge hummed like it was complaining, full of cheap stuff: eggs, milk, a half bag of shredded cheese. Some chicken thighs he'd defrost later. Elijah opened the cabinet, counted cereal bowls in his head against the money in his account. 2 days until payday. 3 days until rent was late again. Zuri slid into the kitchen on socked feet, curly hair mashed to one side, eyes still puffy from sleep. The hospital had told him not to let her run or get too excited. Her heart couldn't handle it. She still tried anyway. "Morning, Daddy," she said, forcing a grin that was too big for how pale her brown skin had gotten lately. "Morning, sunshine." Oh. He kissed her forehead, pretending not to notice how warm she felt. "You want the good cereal or the serious cereal?" She giggled, the sound a little thin. "Good cereal, please." The good cereal was the off-brand version of something with cartoon characters on the box, but he poured it like it was gold. She sat at the wobbly table, swinging her legs, a pink blanket around her shoulders, even though it wasn't that cold. "Daddy, yeah." He was already packing her meds into a plastic bag, checking the times on the labels out of habit. "Am I still going to be able to go to the science fair if I have my surgery?" He froze for half a second, then turned with a smile that felt stapled to his face. "That's the whole point, Zoo. We get your heart fixed. You do the science fair, win a trophy, and then you buy your old man a big house when you become a famous scientist. That's the deal." "I'm going to buy us a house with stairs," she said seriously, as if it were already written. "In a backyard with a tree and a swing. And a dog named Rocket." "Rocket," he repeated. "Why Rocket?" "'Cause he runs fast, but he always comes back." She said it so simply, he had to look away for a second. He'd once promised her mother something similar. Back when they still had a little house in Decatur with a patch of grass out front and a busted grill on the porch. Before the diagnoses and the bills and the way hospital light made everybody look older. Before the day Cherise sat at their kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug like it was a lifeline and said, "Eli, I can't do this no more." I hadn't been loud. No screaming, no broken plates, no names thrown like knives. Just one long, quiet conversation where her eyes kept drifting to their daughter's bedroom door. Cherise loved Zuri. He never doubted that. She just didn't know how to love this life, this constant fear, this drowning, never once coming up for air. "I feel like I can't breathe," she'd whispered. "I feel like every day is just waiting for bad news. So we fight through it," he'd said. "Like we always have." "You fight," she'd corrected, tears streaking her face. "You know how?" "I don't." She left 3 weeks later. Not to another state, not to some fantasy life on TV, just to the other side of the city, with a man who didn't wake up to hospital emails and collection calls. Elijah never told Zuri the ugly parts. Whenever she asked, he said, "Mama loves you." She just ain't good at staying in one place. So he stayed. He took whatever work he could get. Warehouse, security, loading dock, night shifts that broke his back, and day shifts that broke his spirit. When the warehouse cut hours, he got lucky a janitor job at Sterling Biotech's downtown campus. Same Sterling that owned half the hospitals in the city. Same Sterling whose logo flashed on the billboards he drove past on the way to work. The pay wasn't great, but the benefits were better than most, and the night shift meant he could be with Zuri at appointments. The HR lady had looked at his file, at the stack of medical paperwork, and said, "We'll see what we can do." He hadn't realized then that in a building that size, someone higher up might really see it. He didn't meet Avery Sterling. People like him never did. He just saw her name on the elevators, her face on screens in the lobby. Visionary, disruptor, icon. Words thrown around for a woman who lived on floors he only ever mopped. He'd walk past the glass conference rooms at 2 a.m, pushing his cart, watching the lights blink on machines more expensive than his entire life. Sometimes on the executive floor, one office would still have a faint glow under the door. The corner office. The one with her name etched in steel. He never lingered, never peeked. Just wiped, emptied, moved on. That's what men like him were supposed to do. Leave no trace, cause no trouble, and hope the paycheck cleared. right up until the night the call came from the hospital. The doctor said, "Mr. Carter, I'm afraid we can't wait anymore." And everything he'd been barely holding together finally snapped. That's how he ended up in that buzzing, too bright room, watching his daughter's heart fight on a screen. When the door opened, and Avery Sterling walked in like a decision he had never been given a chance to vote on. Hospitals had a way of swallowing hours without anyone noticing. The clocks on the walls said time was moving, but inside the pediatric wing, felt suspended like everyone was holding their breath with the children who couldn't breathe on their own. Elijah stood by the window, staring out at the parking lot. Cars came and went. People moved between sliding doors, but none of it felt connected to him. Bill's work, exhaustions, those were problems he could wrestle with. But this slow fading of his daughter, this was a fight where he didn't even know where to throw the first punch. Behind him, Zuri slept, her breath shallow, but steady for the moment. Machines hummed softly beside her, blinking tiny lights that made the room feel colder. Like her life was being measured in colors and beeps. A doctor stepped in, a tall black man with tired eyes. Dr. Hughes. He'd been Zuri's cardiologist for months. The one person who never softened bad news with fake smiles. "Elijah," he said quietly. The tone made Elijah straighten instantly. "What's wrong?" Hughes held a tablet to his chest as if shielding himself from the conversation he had to start. "Her heart is losing strength faster than anticipated. We can manage the symptoms tonight, but we can't keep delaying the procedure." Procedure. The word felt like a blade dipped in ice. "She needs it within the next 48 hours, Hughes continued. "If we wait longer, we risk irreversible damage." Elijah rubbed the back of his neck, wishing he could scrub reality off his skin. "You told me the surgery alone is 6 figures. And the post-care? I know." Hughes's voice softened. "I wish I could tell you there's a way around it. But experimental treatments aren't covered by insurance. Not for cases like hers. Cases like hers. Well, children whose bodies fail before they ever get to live in them." "What if I get on a payment plan?" Elijah asked, even though he already knew the answer. Hughes sighed a long, helpless exhale. "Payment plan doesn't work with procedures that don't legally exist yet." Elijah let out a bitter laugh. "So what am I supposed to do? Sell my soul?" Hughes didn't answer. It's not because he didn't have one. He just didn't have anything left to offer. "I'll keep her stable tonight," the doctor said. "But Elijah, you need a miracle before Friday." Miracle? Life's most expensive word. When the doctor left, Elijah leaned against the wall, hands on his knees trying not to break. But the truth seeped in through the cracks anyway. He had run out of people to call. He had run out of favors to ask. He'd run out of ways to pretend he wasn't losing her. A soft cough came from the bed. Zuri stirred, lifting her face toward him. "Daddy," she whispered. He forced his voice steady. "I'm right here, sweet pea. Were you crying?" He wiped his face. Quickly, if there were no tears yet. "Nah, Daddy's just tired. You don't sleep enough," she mumbled. He smiled faintly. "You talk too much for someone half asleep." She giggled, a tiny sound that shook his heart more than any bad news. "Daddy, yeah? Do you think Mom knows I'm sick?" The question was a small thing, said softly, but it landed like a punch. Elijah swallowed hard. "She knows you're strong. That's what matters." Zuri blinked slowly. "I miss her sometimes." He touched her cheek gently. "Me too, baby." Outside their door, nurses pushed carts. The intercom buzzed. Monitor beeped to rooms down, life continuing at its indifferent pace. But just a few feet beyond all that, someone else was standing still. Avery Sterling. She remained in the hallway, slightly turned away so no one noticed she wasn't actually moving. She held a folder in her hands with Zuri's labs clipped inside, a privilege only someone of her status could access. She'd requested them 30 minutes earlier, a simple command that sent. Administrators scrambling. What she read in those charts had unsettled her more than she expected. A disease she couldn't buy her way out of. A little girl who reminded her of promises she once made to a mother she'd already buried. A father whose devotion cut through her armor in a way she didn't understand. She closed the folder slowly. The truth was simple. This child didn't need a CO. She needed a miracle. And Avery Sterling was not accustomed to being helpless. She turned toward the door again, fingers tightening around the folder. Tonight wouldn't be the night she walked in, not yet. But eventually she would, because she had already decided one thing: a life this small, this bright, this fragile, should not be allowed to slip away. Not when she had the power to hold it. Morning came without sunlight. Hospitals were like that. No windows in the right places. No warmth in the right moments. No sense of time, except the tremor in a father's hands when another hour passed without answers. Elijah sat beside Zori's bed, elbows on his knees, face buried in his palms. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw numbers: medication costs, surgery estimates, overdue bills, the minus sign in his bank account that felt like a verdict. He'd spent the early hours doing what broke men often do, scrolling through possibilities that didn't exist. Loans he'd be denied. Grants that required paperwork he didn't have. Charities that helped qualifying cases, which somehow never included families who looked like his. He tried calling 3 organizations before dawn. 2 didn't pick up. One put him on hold for 40 minutes before saying the same line he'd heard too many times. We wish we could do more. Wish, hope, pray, words that didn't move money or cure hearts. A soft shuffle pulled him out of his thoughts. Zuri woke slowly, blinking at the ceiling like she couldn't remember where she was. When her gaze landed on him, she offered the faintest smile. Daddy, you're still wearing the same clothes. He exhaled through a tired laugh. You're observant for someone half asleep. You said that yesterday? Her smile faded into a soft seriousness. You need rest. His chest tightened. A child shouldn't worry about their father's exhaustion, not from a hospital bed. He touched her forehead. I'll rest when you do. She reached out with a small, shaky hand and curled her fingers around his. Daddy! Her voice wasn't scared, it was worse. Accepting what's gonna happen to me. The kind of freeze that only fathers who've run out of lies know. Before he could answer, the door creaked open. A social worker stepped inside Ms. Delgado. The one who'd been checking in since the paperwork mentioned Elijah was a single parent. She offered a soft nod. Morning, Mr. Carter. Can I speak with you a moment? He stiffened. Those words never led to anything good. Zuri noticed the tension immediately. You can talk here, she said before Elijah could respond. Delgado hesitated. It's adult things, sweetie. Zuri's eyes dimmed a little, and Elijah hated how often she heard that phrase. Stood, gently letting go of her hand. I'll be right outside, baby. Fast as lightning. He forced a grin. She forced one back. In the hallway, Delgado's expression shifted to professional neutrality, the kind used when delivering news families choke on. Mr. Carter, she began carefully. We've reviewed the case notes. Jury's condition is considered high risk. The hospital is concerned about the financial limitations for follow-up care. His jaw clenched. I'm working on it, I know. But if the surgery becomes available soon, the administration needs assurance of post-operative stability. Meaning what? She inhaled, slowly preparing a blow. Meaning the state may need to evaluate temporary guardianship options to ensure Zuri receives the post-care she requires. Everything inside Elijah went silent. Guardianship. That word didn't mean help. It meant loss. You're telling me, he said slowly, that because I'm poor, I might lose my daughter. I'm not saying that that's exactly what you're saying. Her shoulders slumped. She didn't deny it. We're trying to avoid extreme outcomes, Mr. Carter. But her medical needs, my daughter, he cut in, voice trembling, needs me. Not a temporary stranger. Delgado softened, but not enough to matter. If the surgery becomes accessible and you can't support the aftercare, the state has protocols. Protocols. Always protocols for people like him. He pressed a hand against the wall to steady himself. What am I supposed to do? Magic $100,000 out of thin air? Delgado winced. There are rare exceptions. Special authorizations. But they require. She stopped suddenly, eyes flicking down the hall. A woman stood at the far end. White coat, sharp posture, eyes too focused for a casual passerby. Avery Sterling. Delgado's face shifted instantly to something like fear. Elijah felt it like a cold draft down his spine. The social worker lowered her voice. "Mr. Carter, whatever happens, please remember, I'm on your side." He barely heard her. His pulse thundered in his ears. Avery didn't look away, didn't blink, didn't move. She just watched, studied, decided. Delgado excused herself quickly, disappearing down the hallway. Elijah stood alone for a moment, breathing hard, gripping the railing until his knuckles went white. He didn't know this woman. He didn't know her intentions, but he knew one thing the same way. Prey knows a storm is coming. Avery Sterling wasn't watching him out of curiosity. She was watching him because somewhere between his desperation and his daughter's fading breaths. Night returned before Elijah realized the day had ended. Hospitals had a cruel talent for blurring sunsets into fluorescent hum. His phone showed 9:47 p.m. He hadn't eaten since morning, hadn't stepped outside. Hadn't allowed himself a single breath that didn't feel like it carried Zori's name. She slept restlessly, murmuring small, sounds-little gasps that made his heart seize every time. Nurses checked in more often now, not because they wanted to, but because her charts demanded it. Every beep from the monitor felt like a countdown. At 10:03 p.m., another doctor came in with that tight professional smile that meant, "Brace yourself, Elijah," she began softly. "Her heart is working twice as hard as it should. We've stabilized her for now, but she's not holding as strongly as this morning."
"How long do we have?"
he asked. She hesitated. "Not long enough. Not long enough. Not enough money. Not enough hope." It was the same theme, just sung in different voices. After she left, Elijah stepped into the hallway to breathe. His head throbbed. His back ached. His hands trembled from exhaustion or fear, he couldn't tell which. A vending machine buzzed beside him, full of snacks he didn't have the appetite or cash for. He pressed his palms against his face, dragging them down, trying to hold himself together before he shattered in public. "Rough night?" The voice behind him was smooth to smooth for a hospital. He stiffened and turned. Avery Sterling stood a few feet away. Not in her tailored coat this time, but in something deceptively simple. A charcoal-wrapped sweater, slim black trousers. Hair tied back, like she'd come from a boardroom rather than a pediatric ward. Her presence carried weight. Not loud. Not aggressive, just undeniable. Elijah straightened instinctively. "Ma'am, if this is about it's about your daughter," she said quietly. His breath hitched. "What about her?" Avery approached slowly, as if showing him she wasn't there to pounce. "I spoke with her attending physician. Her condition is deteriorating faster than projected." "I know that," he snapped, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, I know. You're exhausted," she observed. "That isn't a crime," he swallowed. "Why are you involved?" "Because my company developed the only treatment that can save her." Avery replied without lowering her gaze, her directness unsettled, and more than any threat could have. "I read the financial notes," she added. "Your insurance rejects all experimental procedures. Even if it didn't, you don't meet the income requirement for coverage tiers. Legally, you cannot obtain the surgery on your own." The words cut deeper than they should have. Hearing them from a billionaire made it feel even more punishing. "Look," he said tightly, "I don't know what you want from me, but I'm not interested in pity." Avery's expression hardened slightly. "I don't offer pity, Mr. Carter. I offer solutions." He frowned. "Solutions come with strings? Everything worth having does." He exhaled sharply. "Why us? Why her?" "You don't know us." Avery paused. It was the first time she showed anything resembling vulnerability. "When I was a child," she began quietly, "my mother's heart failed. We didn't have money. We didn't have options. We only had time, and even that ran out." Elijah blinked. He hadn't expected honesty. "She died in a public hospital, very much like this one," Avery continued. "And I swore the day she passed that no child should lose a parent because of a dollar sign." Emotion flickered in her eyes, not enough to soften her edges, but enough to show a crack in the armor. "But now," she added, looking toward Zuri's room, "the irony is unbearable. Your daughter is dying from a condition my company can cure. Yet the system I helped build keeps families like yours out. Elijah didn't speak. He couldn't. Avery stepped closer, her voice low, controlled, almost soothing. I can approve her surgery. His breath stopped. I can put her at the top of the list, she continued. I can authorize the experimental treatment, and I can ensure she has the post-care required to survive. He waited for the catch. The hook. The twist. It came softly, but sharply. But I need certainty. She remained connected to me after she recovers. His stomach dropped. Connected how? Avery didn't answer immediately. Instead, she examined him the way someone studies a fragile item before lifting it. I'll explain everything in detail tomorrow, she said. But tonight, before I decide anything, I need to know one thing. Her eyes locked onto his. How far are you willing to go to save your daughter? The hallway felt too small for the question. He wanted to say anything. He wanted to say everything. He wanted to say there was no line at all. But the truth burned quietly in his throat. He didn't know. Not anymore. And Avery Sterling could see that. Which was exactly why she had chosen him. The next morning arrived without warning. Elijah must have fallen asleep sitting upright in the chair beside Zuri's bed, because he woke to the stiff ache in his back and the dim glow of machines casting long shadows across the room. Zuri was still asleep, her breath shallow but steady. For a moment, he let himself watch Horelli watch her, the delicate rise and fall of her chest, the tiny tremble in her fingers, the faint blush of her cheeks, the life he was losing 1 hour at a time. A nurse came in quietly, checked the monitors, adjusted a line, and left with a sympathetic nod. She didn't need words. Her eyes said enough. Time was running out. Elijah washed his face in the tiny restroom sink, the water cold enough to sting. He'd barely slept, barely eaten, barely been human for days. Everything inside him felt stretched thin, like a rope frayed down to the last fiber. At 8:12 a.m., there was a knock on the door. Soft, deliberate, a knock that didn't belong to a nurse. Elijah turned, tensed, and saw her. Avery Sterling stepped inside with the composed calm of someone who'd made too many impossible decisions to be shaken by one more. She wore a navy suit 2-day clean, sharp lines that contrasted painfully with Elijah's wrinkled t-shirt and fatigue-sunk eyes. Zuri shifted in her sleep but didn't wake. "Mr. Carter?" Avery said softly. "May we speak privately?" He nodded once and followed her into the hallway. She led him to a family consultation room, small, sterile, the kind of place where people received either miracles or devastation. There was no in-between. Avery closed the door behind them. "Elijah," she began, setting a folder on the table between them. "I spent most of the night reviewing your daughter's case." He swallowed. And she qualifies for the experimental procedure," she said. "She meets every medical criterion." His knees nearly gave out. "But I can't afford it," he said weakly. "That is correct. No sugarcoat. No soft landing." Elijah stared at the floor. He could hear Zuri's voice in his head, "Daddy, will I get to go to the science fair?" And something inside him cracked deeper. Avery opened the folder. Inside were documents stamped with Sterling Biotech's seal. "I can authorize this procedure fully," she said. "I can waive the financial requirements. I can override the insurance denial. I can move her to the top of the treatment list." He exhaled shakily. You're saying you can save her. It's not dramatic, not emotional, just certain." But she continued, "I will not do it without terms." There it was. The cliff he knew was coming. Elijah straightened, jaw tight. "What terms?" Avery stepped closer, her voice lower now, carrying weight rather than threat. "Elijah, I don't have family. I don't have a partner. I don't have anyone who will inherit what I've built." Her gaze hardened. "By the time I realized I wanted a child, every route closed. Age, health complications, irreversible damage. Damned. He wasn't expecting that. My body is no longer capable of carrying a pregnancy," she said, the words landing like confessions wrestled from stone. But my legacy requires an heir. Someone tied to me by blood. Elijah's stomach twisted. I don't understand what this has to do with Ziri. Avery looked him straight in the eyes. I want to secure her future. Education, healthcare, housing, protection, financial stability. A life without the struggles you've had to survive. His breath caught. Why? Why her? Because she is extraordinary, Avery said simply. Her medical resilience. Her intelligence. Her genetic viability. And because she is loved fiercely by a father who would die for her. That foundation matters. The room felt like it was shrinking, and in return, Avery continued quietly when she is an adult. I intend for her to carry my biological heir. The sentence didn't echo, but it hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Elijah stared at her, disbelief turning to horror. You want my daughter to what? It would be voluntary when she comes of age, Avery stated without flinching. Not forced, not coerced, but arranged now, guaranteed, legalized through a contractual guardianship tie. He shook his head. You're talking about planning a pregnancy for a child who's barely 9 years old. I'm talking about saving her life today, Avery cut in, her tone sharp but not cruel, and ensuring she steps into adulthood with power rather than vulnerability. Elijah's hands balled into fists. This is insane. Avery didn't move, didn't blink. Elijah, she said softly, your daughter will not survive the week without this intervention. I am offering her life. In a future you cannot possibly secure alone. He felt sick, nauseous, cornered. What if I say no? He whispered. Avery exhaled, and the answer was colder than anything she'd said before. Then she dies. The words were merciless, because the truth was merciless. And the state, she added, will not permit you to take her home when she's unstable. They will remove her. They will decide her fate without you. Elijah staggered a step back. This wasn't an offer. It was a noose disguised as mercy. Avery stepped closer, her voice almost gentle. I am giving you a choice most fathers never get. He stared at her, breath unsteady, rage and love and fear all clashing in his chest. But beneath all of it, he knew she was right about one thing. Ziri didn't have time. And neither did he. Elijah didn't walk out of the consultation room so much as he escaped. It like the air inside had poisoned him, and the hallway was the only place left to breathe. But even here, under harsh fluorescent lights and the distant hum of machines, the walls felt too close, too aware, too ready to collapse around him. He pressed both palms to his chest, as if he could physically hold himself together. His heart was pounding too fast, too heavy, a storm trying to tear through ribs. I intend for your daughter to carry my heir. The words echoed like a siren he couldn't outrun. A nurse walked past him, offering a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. He couldn't return it. He couldn't move. Every muscle in his body felt turned to stone, except the trembling in his hands. He forced himself back into Zori's room. She slept curled on her side, a small figure dwarfed by hospital blankets. Her stuffed bear one he'd won from a claw machine after 20 failed attempts rested beside her. Worn thin from too many nights being held too tightly, Elijah took the bear in his hand and sat. His hands dwarfed it. His daughter dwarfed him. He touched her cheek gently with the back of his fingers. Her skin felt warm, too warm, like her body was fighting something too big. Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't wake. He wished she would wake. He wished she would smile, talk, crack jokes, ask for cereal. Anything but this silence. Because silence meant time, and he didn't have time. A quiet knock sounded at the door. He looked up. Not Avery, not a doctor, not a nurse. It was Ms. Delgado, the social worker, of all the people he wanted to face right now. She was last. Elijah, she said softly, stepping inside. I wanted to check on you. I saw you speaking with Ms. Sterling. His jaw tightened. You talked to her too? No, Delgado said gently. But when someone like Avery Sterling steps onto a pediatric floor unannounced, people notice. Her tone wasn't judgmental, just honest. Delgado stepped closer. Look, I know you're being pushed into impossible corners. I know what this feels like. No, he said sharply. You don't. She didn't flinch. You think you do, Elijah said, voice low, but you get to go home at night. You get to sleep, eat, take a breath without worrying if your kid will still be alive in the morning. You don't stand where I'm standing. Delgado nodded slowly. You're right. I don't stand where you stand. But I stand near men who do. Every day. And I recognize the look in your eyes right now. He turned away. That's the look of a father who's out of road, she continued softly. And men out of road sometimes take deals that scar them later. His breath faltered. She didn't know the details, but she didn't have to. Elijah, she whispered, don't let fear choose for you. He stared at Zuri at the 4-line in her hand. At the rise and fall of her chest that felt too fragile, it's too uncertain. Fear isn't choosing, he said in a voice barely above a whisper. Death is choosing. I'm just trying to keep up. Delgado didn't respond. After a moment, she placed a card on the small table. If you need someone to talk to before making decisions, call me. She began stepping out, then paused. Whatever Avery Sterling offered you, be very, very careful. When she left, the room felt colder. Elijah sat there for nearly an hour, staring at nothing and everything. He kept hearing Avery's voice. I am offering her life. In a future you cannot possibly secure alone. He didn't want her help. He didn't want her terms. He didn't want her in their lives, but he wanted Zuri alive more than he wanted anything else. More than he wanted pride, or safety, or sense. A soft sound broke the silence. Zuri's eyes half opened, sleepy, unfocused. Daddy. He moved to her instantly. Yeah, baby. I'm here. Are you? Mad at me? She murmured, voice weak. His throat tightened. What? No, never. You look sad, she whispered. Did I do something wrong? The question shattered him. He gathered her hand gently. Zuri listened to Daddy. His voice trembled despite trying not to let it. You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing. You were the best thing in my whole world. You hear me? She nodded weakly. I'm just tired, he said softly. Daddy's just tired. She blinked up at him with all the trust in the world. You always fix everything. He couldn't breathe. He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers, gripping her small hand like it was the last warm thing left. I'm trying, baby, he whispered. I'm trying so hard. When she fell back asleep, he stood, because he knew what he had to do. He walked into the hallway, searched the floor with tired eyes, and found her standing near the elevators, reading a chart, as if she already knew he'd come. Avery Sterling looked up slowly, their eyes locked. Elijah stepped closer. Voice rough, heart bruised, soul shaking. Tell me, he said, what exactly your terms are. Avery closed the chart and smiled, not with kindness, not with victory, but with certainty, the kind of smile a person wears when they know. The answer was always going to be yes. Avery didn't bring him to an office. She didn't take him to a conference room. She didn't even walk him to a quiet corner. She simply turned, nodded toward the elevator, and Elijah followed, because fathers of dying children don't negotiate locations. They just moved. They rode down to the administrative floor-polished marble, soft lighting, hallways that smelled like money, not medicine. The contrast stung him. Upstairs, kids fought for their lives. Down here, people fought for quarterly gains. Avery led him into a small executive consultation, sweet frosted glass, long table, 2 chairs. No windows. No distractions. Just a place built for decisions that ruined or saved people. She sat first. He hesitated before sitting across from her. Avery placed a sleek black folder in front of him. Elijah, she began, her voice softer than before but sharper in meaning. I need you to listen carefully. There can be no misunderstandings, he nodded. Though every instinct screamed to run, she opened the folder. Inside were documents stamped with Sterling Biotech's emblem contracts, medical authorization records, guardianship templates, financial agreements, and something that looked like a future he didn't recognize. The procedure your daughter needs. Avery said, is scheduled for trial approval tomorrow morning. I can bypass the trial queue and place her as the priority case. Elijah felt his breath catch. You can do that? I can do anything in this building, she replied plainly. My name built it. She slid a document forward. This is an immediate medical override authorization. Once you sign, Zuri will be prepped for surgery within 24 hours. For a moment, Elijah saw only the bold letters at the top. Emergency exemption. Life-saving IN, TRVNTO, and his throat tightened. But Avery wasn't finished. She slid the second document forward. This, she said quietly, is the guardianship agreement. The room tilted. Guardianship, he repeated, voice cracking. You want custody? No, she corrected gently. Not custody. Not removal. You would remain her sole legal parent until she becomes an adult. But I would be granted access and connection, a formal tie that allows me involvement in her medical care, education, safety, and long-term well-being. Elijah stared at the document, horrified. Why would you need that? He asked. Because when she recovers, Avery said, her words slow and deliberate, I intend to shape the environment she grows into. Opportunities, resources, education, and the other part. He whispered, the part you said yesterday? Avery held his gaze without blinking. When she is an adult, she said, I intend for her to carry my heir. Elijah shut his eyes. Pain ripping through his chest. He thought of Zaretta, teeny hands, soft curls, sleepy smiles. He thought of her future science fairs, birthdays, high school dances. He thought of her innocence, her trust, her life. You're planning her adulthood before she even survives childhood, he whispered. I am planning a life for her, Avery corrected calmly. A protected one, an elevated one. A life your circumstances will not allow. His jaw clenched, shame and rage warring inside him. Don't talk to me about my circumstances. I'm not judging you, she said. I'm acknowledging reality. If she survives, she will need specialized treatment for years. Rehabilitation, monitoring, medication. That costs more annually than your salary. The truth burned because it wasn't cruel, it was real. In your plan, Elijah asked. She grows up, and you expect her to just agree. She will have autonomy, Avery said firmly. But contracts establish expectations early. Stability, purpose, a future where she inherits something extraordinary. Elijah shook his head violently. This is insane. Avery leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. What's insane, Elijah, is pretending you have another option. We froze. You want to save your daughter? She continued. I am giving you the only path that guarantees her survival. And more than survival power. Wealth, protection, legacy. Everything you've wished for her, but could never give. He felt the words hit him like blows. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She didn't demand. She simply held up a mirror to his desperation. You can walk out of this room, Avery said softly. But if you do, she will not live through the week, and you will carry that weight forever. You will remember this conversation every day of your life. Elijah's hands trembled. She is your heart, Avery murmured. I am offering to save your heart. A tear slipped down his cheek before he could stop it. Why her? He whispered. Avery's eyes softened, truly softened for the first time. Because she reminds me of the child I never got to be. Silence filled the room, not peace, not calm, a silence made of breaking points. Elijah reached for the pen, not because he wanted to, but because love leaves men with impossible choices and fathers make them anyway. Elijah didn't remember the moment the pen touched paper. He didn't remember signing the lines, initials scrawled beside clauses he barely understood. He didn't remember Avery gently sliding the documents back into the folder, nor the quiet words she whispered, something like, "You've made the right choice." All he remembered was the feeling afterward, like he'd handed over a part of his soul he could never reclaim. When he walked back into Zuri's room, the morning sun had finally crept through the blinds, casting soft lines of gold across her bed. It made her look warm, alive, something to hold on to. A nurse was already there adjusting her for Mr. Carter, she said with a soft smile. We just received authorization to transfer her to the advanced care wing. They'll prep her for surgery within a few hours. He nodded but couldn't speak. His voice felt like it had been locked somewhere deep inside his chest. How long will the surgery be? He finally managed. 6 to 8 hours. But she'll be in pre-op for a while. The nurse's expression gentled even more. She's in very good hands now. Very good hands. He wished those words didn't sting. Zuri stirred, eyelids fluttering before she woke. Daddy, she mumbled, voice dry and thin. He leaned over her. Hey, baby girl. You okay? She blinked up at him. You look different, he swallowed. Just tired. She studied him the way only a child can openly, honestly, without filters. Did something happen? She whispered. He brushed her curls back gently. Something good, he lied softly. You're gonna get help now. Really? Her eyes widened, a tiny spark lighting in them hope. Fragile but real. Yeah, he whispered. Really? She smiled, the smallest curve of lips, but enough to break him. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand. Mr. Carter, we're ready to take her to the advanced wing. Zuri tightened her grip on his fingers. Daddy, will you come with me? He forced a steady voice. Every step of the way. They rolled her bed through the hallway, Elijah walking beside her, one hand on the rail. People moved aside as they passed nurses, techs, families in waiting rooms with fears of their own. But Elijah didn't see any of it. He only saw. Zuri's fingers wrapped around his. The advanced wing looked nothing like the pediatric floor upstairs. Glass walls. Soft lights. Machines that hummed with quiet precision, instead of rattling like they were begging for mercy. Everything here smelled like sterilized wealth. As they entered, Elijah noticed 2 security guards near the nurse's station. They weren't in hospital uniforms. They wore sleek, discreet earpieces. Sterling Biotech security, of course. One of them nodded politely as Zuri was wheeled in. Elijah's stomach twisted. They reached the pre-op room, a spacious chamber with warm lighting. Not too bright, not too cold. A nurse explained the process, checked Zuri's vitals, placed monitors on her chest. Elijah sat beside her, holding her hand through every step. Daddy, she whispered, am I gonna feel it? No, baby, he murmured. They'll make sure you're asleep the whole time. She nodded, her eyes flickering with worry. Will you be here? I'll be right outside, he said. You'll wake up and see me first thing. A tear slipped from the corner of her eye. He wiped it gently. Then the door opened. Avery stepped in. Not dressed like a CEO today. Not in power colors or sharp lines. She wore a simple, soft gray blouse and dark slack. Subtle, controlled, almost gentle. But her presence still carried weight. The room shifted the moment she crossed the threshold. Zuri blinked at her. Who's she? Elijah froze. Avery approached slowly, stopping at a respectful distance from the bed. Her face softened, but her posture stayed composed. My name is Avery, she said quietly. Your doctors are very good, Zuri. They're going to help your heart get stronger. Zuri tilted her head, studying her in the same open way she studied Elijah earlier. You look like someone important, Avery smiled softly. Not more important than you. Elijah's chest tightened. The nurse returned with pre-op paperwork, giving Elijah a pen. Sign here, Mr. Carter. This confirms you understand the risks and authorization. He hesitated. The pen felt heavier than it should, if like it contained every compromise he had already made. Avery watched his hand closely, but not possessively. Calm, certain. He signed. Zuri yawned softly. Daddy, I'm right here, he whispered. The anesthesiologist entered. Zuri, I'm going to give you something to help you sleep, okay? She nodded, reaching for Elijah's hand again. He held it tightly. Daddy, she said, voice sleepy already. Yeah, sunshine. Will everything be normal again? His heart cracked. He forced a smile. It'll be better. Her eyes closed, breathing slow, soft, safe. For the first time in days, she looked peaceful. The nurse gently touched Elijah's shoulder. We'll take her back now. You can wait in the family area. He let go of her hand only when the bed began to move. The doors closed behind her. Silence. Then, Avery stepped beside him close enough that he could feel her presence. Far enough that she didn't touch him, Elijah, she said softly. Your daughter is going to live. What? He nodded. Tears burning. But understand this, Avery continued quietly. From this moment forward, her life is tied to mine. He closed his eyes because he knew he had just stepped into a world he never chose, and there was no way back. The family waiting. Area on the advanced surgical wing was nothing like the main. Hospitals, plush chairs, filtered sunlight. A silent coffee machine that brewed drinks no one in Elijah's tax bracket would ever afford. Magazines about philanthropy and global innovation sat neatly on a glass table. It wasn't a place for parents like him. Elijah sat on the edge of a leather chair, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. He stared at the floor, seeing nothing but the image of Zuri being rolled away. Avery stood by the window, arms folded loosely, her profile sharp against the morning light. She didn't speak. She didn't offer comfort. She didn't make small talk. She just stayed. A billionaire CEO, staying in a hospital waiting room with a janitor. It made no sense. Nothing about today made sense. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time lost its shape when your child's life was in someone else's hands. Finally, Avery walked over and sat a seat away from him, not close enough to crowd him, but close enough to acknowledge his anguish. Elijah, she said gently. She is in the hands of the best surgical team in the country. I handpicked them myself. He didn't look up. You pick people like you're picking stock. Avery didn't flinch. No, I pick them like I'm choosing who gets to hold the most important life in the room. He let out a shaky breath. You don't even know her. Avery hesitated. A real hesitation. One that felt human, not strategic. I know enough, she said quietly. He scoffed softly, rubbing his face. You know, charts, scans, numbers, not her. Not who she is. Not what she likes. Not what scares her. Not what makes her laugh. You're right, she said. I don't know those things. She paused. But I intend to learn. That made him look up. And for the first time, saw something in Avery's expression he hadn't expected. Vulnerability. She wasn't unbreakable. She wasn't invincible. She wasn't stone. She was lonely. Why her? Elijah asked again, voice raw. You have access to anyone? Any future. Any resource. Why my daughter? Avery's gaze drifted downward. As if searching for an answer she didn't often allow herself to revisit. When I was 8, she began slowly. My mother collapsed during a school recital. I didn't understand what was happening. I just remember the sound of her breathing, thin, sharp, fading. Elijah's chest tightened. This wasn't business. This wasn't manipulation. This was memory. She died that night, Avery said, her voice steady but quiet. Heart failure. No insurance. No money. No treatment available for people like us. The word struck him. I grew up being told that brilliance could outrun poverty, she continued. But grief doesn't care how smart you are. Loss doesn't negotiate. Power doesn't come fast enough for the people who need it most. Elijah stared at her. She wasn't talking like a CEO. She wasn't even talking like a billionaire. She was talking like a child who'd never healed. And when I built Sterling Biotech, she added, I swore I would never stand by and watch a child die because of circumstance. But there are thousands of children, Elijah whispered. Why this one? Avery met his eyes. Her gaze didn't waver. Because she has something I didn't, she said softly. A father who refuses to abandon her. A parent fighting every minute, even when the world is stacked against him. Elijah blinked hard, looking away. And Avery added in an even quieter voice, because when I looked at her chart, I saw the same diagnosis my mother had. The same rhythms. The same timeline? The breath punched out of his lungs. Avery's voice cracked for the first time barely. But enough. I could not save my mother, she whispered. But I can save your daughter. Silence wrapped the room, thick, heavy, intimate. Elijah swallowed. You could have done this without conditions. No, Avery said softly. I couldn't. Why not? Her eyes darkened not with cruelty, but with something far more complicated. Because I don't want to save a stranger's child, she murmured. I want to save my future's child. I want to invest in someone I will protect for decades. A legacy. A connection. A life that will outlive me. She looked down at her hands, and because she admitted, I have no one. Not a partner. Not a family. Not a soul in this world who would mourn me beyond the public headlines. I have built an empire, Elijah, but I have built it alone. He stared at her. Breath as unsteady as hers, and you want. He said slowly, you want Zori to fill that void. Avery closed her eyes for a brief second. When they opened, they were softer. No, she said. I want to fill hers. The words hit him harder than anything yet. Because beneath all the power, beneath the money, beneath the impossible offery Sterling was, in her own way, broken too. They sat in silence to people from opposite worlds. Tied together by something neither of them asked for, then a nurse opened the door. Mr. Carter. Ms. Sterling. The surgery is halfway through. Both stood at once. Is she okay? Elijah asked, voice cracking. The nurse gave a measured smile. So far, everything is going according to plan. Elijah exhaled shakily. Avery's hand almost reached for him. Almost, but she stopped just short, fingers curling back. Not yet. Not here. But something between them had shifted. And once shifted, nothing would ever return to what it had been. The waiting room felt too bright for what Elijah was becoming. Half a dozen families sat scattered around him, some pacing, some crying quietly, some staring blankly into space, but he didn't see any of them. His entire world existed behind the double doors where his daughter's life was being opened, repaired, stitched, rewritten by hands far steadier than his. Hours passed like slow-moving shadows. Nurses came and went. Someone turned on a TV in the corner playing morning news, but the sound was low, muffled, easy to ignore. Elijah didn't move. Didn't blink much. Didn't breathe unless his body forced him to. Then Avery walked in. Not rushed. Not dramatic. But with the quiet confidence of a woman who expected the world to shift around her. Elijah, she said, stopping a few feet away, as if deciding how close she was allowed to stand. The surgery is halfway through. His heart stumbled. Is she okay? The team reports stable vitals, Avery replied. She's responding well. Better than projected. Elijah sagged into the chair, exhaling a breath he'd been holding for hours or maybe days. Thank God, he whispered. Avery didn't smile, but something softened around her eyes. Your daughter is strong, he nodded, rubbing his forehead. She gets that from her mama. Avery paused for the slightest second, studying him as if committing that truth to memory. She may need more than strength in the years ahead, Avery said quietly. Recovery won't be small. Her condition requires long-term monitoring, specialized medication, annual evaluations, access to our genetic labs. Elijah's stomach tightened. I'll do anything she needs. Avery stepped closer, not touching him, not towering over him, but standing near enough that her presence felt like gravity. You won't be doing it alone, she said softly. He swallowed. I know what I signed. No, Avery corrected gently. You know the agreement on paper, but you don't yet understand the life it creates. He frowned. What does that mean? Avery turned her gaze toward the hallway, watching nurses pass. Your daughter's survival today binds her future to mine. That isn't cruelty. That's structure. She's not an asset, Elijah snapped. And I'm not a villain, Avery replied calmly. The world simply lacks a language for agreements like ours. Their eyes locked as filled with conflict. hers with unsettling certainty. Elijah, she continued, I want you to start preparing yourself. When Zuri wakes, she'll need stability, routine, and introductions. His chest tightened. You want her to know who you are? She should, Avery said. I will be part of her life. Not behind glass. Not hidden. Not negotiated later. The contract doesn't work like that. He looked away, jaw clenched. I don't want her scared. I don't intend to scare her, Avery said. I intend to shape her. A cold wave rolled through him, but before he could answer, a surgeon stepped through the double doors. Elijah Carter? He shot to his feet. Yes, that's me. The surgeon smiled gently. She's stable. The procedure went well. She's heading to recovery now, and you can see her in about an hour. Elijah closed his eyes, a tear escaping despite his effort to stay strong. Thank you, he breathed, when he opened his eyes again. Avery was watching him not with triumph, not with greed, but with something far more dangerous, possession wrapped in affection. Elijah, she said softly, this is the beginning, not the end. What does that mean? He asked, heart pounding. Avery stepped closer, lowering her voice. Your daughter now lives because of me, and the world she wakes up to will be shaped by what I decide next. He felt a chill crawl up his spine. You said this was about her future, he whispered. It is, Avery replied. But her future is tied to mine. And that means... She paused, letting the words form slowly, carefully. ... You will be tied to me too. The fluorescent lights hummed. A nurse called a name in the distance. A phone rang. The world kept moving, unaware that everything inside Elijah had just tilted into a new orbit. He looked at Avery with a mixture of fear, gratitude, resentment, and awe. What happens now? He asked quietly. Avery's expression softened, beautiful and terrifying at once. Now, she said, your daughter wakes up. And when she does, her voice dropped lower. We begin building the life she owes her second chance. Elijah's breath faltered. Not because she sounded cruel, because she sounded certain. And certainty, he realized, was more dangerous than any threat. The doors behind them swung open as a nurse came to guide him to recovery. But Avery's last words echoed louder than any footsteps. This miracle had a price. And now, the payments begin. He thinks this is just another bad night at work, but the next 60 seconds will change his life forever. Subscribe to see Part 2.